Two former champions have requested their release from WWE, and did Vince McMahon scrap plans for a Bray Wyatt return? But first, the Raw after WrestleMania would go down last night in Los Angeles, California, a show that would see a major backstage shift. WWE are hot on the heels of perhaps their biggest ever news story, with the company now officially being sold to the Endeavor Group, merging with the UFC in the process. As part of the transaction, Vince McMahon will remain in his post as chairman of the merger, although it also appears that this has led to him being back in charge of the on-screen creative process, this after almost a year of Triple H at the helm. The first sign of this emerged from Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, who releases a run sheet for WWE shows ahead of time that are normally pretty spot on. Sapp would then take to Twitter to note that there were many last-minute changes to last night's show, something that was a common occurrence when Vince McMahon was in charge of booking, and Sean would write, "This show is categorically different than how it was laid out even a few hours ago. At least 2 matches scrapped or changed." PW Insider would then all but confirm the rumours, with them reporting that Vince was indeed in the gorilla position last night for most of the show, directly overseeing proceedings. This followed his partial involvement over WrestleMania weekend. The report also adds that the change has negatively affected the mood in the locker room, with some no longer feeling their job is safe, and PW Insider would note, "Among some talents we spoke with, there was a huge negative shift in morale as they realized that things were going back to exactly where they were before Paul Levesque was placed in control as chief content officer. One source said that the place felt nuked, but others didn't go that far. The feeling was, going forward, the likelihood was that McMahon would be overseeing everything again. A big part of that feeling of resignation was that Levesque is genuinely liked and trusted by the talents, especially since so many of them came through the WWE NXT system, and for some, that feeling of security many had felt in the run from SummerSlam to WrestleMania was no longer a given, and would be a far departure from how some we spoke to felt tonight." The report concluded that there was always a feeling among many that all roads would lead to McMahon being back in creative control, though some want to see if this will be a regular thing, or whether it just happened last night because McMahon was at TV due to the recent sale of the company. I guess only time will tell, starting this Friday on SmackDown. But before we get into what actually happened on Raw, let's rewind back to WrestleMania weekend, where Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman would reference the CM Punk all-out media scrum. The open to the now infamous scrum would see Punk interrupt a question from Chicago journalist Nick Hausman of Wrestling Inc. for his supposed friendship with Colt Cabana from their days on the improv scene. This after reports had emerged blaming the straight-edge superstar for costing his former best friend his job in AEW. When Roman and Heyman sat down for their press conference after WrestleMania, Hausman would ask them about the rumored WWE buyout by Endeavor, receiving this response.
Yeah, he has a bad habit of starting problems at press conferences.
You care to ad-lib and maybe, rebuttal him? Yeah.
No, he knows he has a bad habit of asking bad questions at press conferences.
Let's say the improv or whatever, right? Yeah. All right, so that's it. You wasted your question. All right, good night, guys.
Matt Jackson of the Young Bucks finds himself on the shelf right now, this after suffering a partially torn tricep during the recent freeweight match for the AEW Trios Championships, where the Elite would take on the Jericho Appreciation Society and the champions, the House of Black. A report then emerged from Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer that Matt had opted against undergoing surgery in order to recover quicker, something the man himself confirmed this week on Being the Elite. In an update for his fans, Jackson would say, "Suffered a torn bicep. It's a partially torn bicep. After consulting with multiple doctors and wrestlers, other people in the industry who have suffered the exact same injury, I've decided not to do the surgery. Instead, as I said, we are on our way to LA to start other forms of therapy. These other forms of therapy shall turn what would have been months out on the shelf to only just weeks. That is the hope. I feel pretty good. I don't know if I'm just a freak, but I feel pretty good, and my arm feels pretty good. So the hope is, let's get in there, let's do these other therapies, let's do the PRP, and let's get me in the ring ASAP. That is the hope." As mentioned, the hope is Matt Jackson will be back in action in a matter of weeks and not months, with the aim being for him to return ready for Double or Nothing on May 28th. Next up, we have some sad news to bring you as WWE Hall of Famer Bushwhacker Butch, real name Robert Miller, has sadly passed away at the age of 78. His passing was announced last night by tag team partner and nephew Luke Williams, who released a statement on his Instagram page. After the news broke, WWE would pay tribute to Butch on their website and wrote, "As the Kiwis, they ventured to Stu Hart's Canadian-based Stampede Wrestling before relocating to the NWA under the new team name of the Sheepherders. Known for their wild, brawling style, the Sheepherders won several championships and accolades before finally landing in WWE in January 1989, and now dubbing themselves Butch and Luke, the Bushwhackers. The Bushwhackers became one of WWE's most popular tag teams of all time, competing in multiple WrestleManias. They thrilled the WWE universe with their signature march to the ring, swinging their arms and hugging fans along the way. In 2015, Miller and Wickens were bestowed with the highest honor in WWE when they were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Now let's get to a couple of stories coming out of last night's episode of Monday Night Raw, which received a poor reception from fans to say the least. One notable thing that took place would happen during a segment with The Miz, who was coming off the back of 2 losses at WrestleMania to Pat McAfee and Snoop Dogg on Night 1 and Night 2 respectively. Miz would assure the crowd that there will be no more surprises this time around, however he would eventually be interrupted by the returning Matt Riddle, who hasn't been seen since early December. Riddle would then take Miz out after a brief exchange, seemingly setting up a feud between the two and a match next week. Riddle's absence was caused by a suspension last year, this after failing a drug test before being sent to rehab. He was then written off of TV after an attack by the Bloodline's Solo Sikoa, with him now making his return to screens. Elsewhere on last night's show, Cody Rhodes would confront Roman Reigns following his loss for the undisputed WWE Universal title at WrestleMania, calling for a rematch after the interference from Solo Sikoa. Paul Heyman would refuse the offer, this before Cody suggested they meet in a tag team match instead. It was then revealed that Brock Lesnar would be Rhodes' partner for the match, which was set for the main event later that night. However, during the match introductions, Brock would assault Cody from behind, ripping him limb from limb for what felt like an eternity. The show would then close with the Beast standing tall over the American Nightmare, kicking off a main event feud. With that said, the finish did receive criticism from fans due to there being 2 heel and flat finishes in a row, with Night 2 of WrestleMania and Rhodes' loss leading into this angle the next night. With that said, we'll have to see how it plays out going forward, with there being hope that Cody will come out on top in the rivalry in the long run. And before we continue, why not drop a like down below if you're enjoying the video, and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on so you don't miss the latest wrestling news, as we try to reach 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. But with that said, let's get to the next story. And next, news broke last night via Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer that NXT duo Rip Fowler and Jagger Reed had requested their release from WWE, with it being noted that the request had been granted. However, Meltzer would later provide an update on Wrestling Observer Radio, noting that whilst Reed and Fowler had told people their request was granted, one source in the company said that this isn't official, with their status seemingly being up in the air. The former NXT UK Tag Champions, who go by the name of the Grizzled Young Veterans, have most recently been an active part of the Schism faction led by Joe Gacy, competing as recently as this past Friday on the NXT Stand and Deliver event, with them also being in attendance for WrestleMania. Whether they will eventually be granted their release remains to be seen, with their futures now in the hands of WWE higher-ups. Now let's get back to last night's episode of Monday Night Raw and what appears to be scrapped plans for Bray Wyatt. Following WrestleMania Night 2, a video would emerge online of a fan interaction with the absent Eater of Worlds, who hasn't been seen on television for a number of weeks at this point. When the fan asked why he wasn't at Mania, Wyatt would respond by saying, "My WrestleMania's tomorrow, bro," implying the Raw after Mania, this before driving off through the streets of Los Angeles. However, as we know, there was no Bray Wyatt to be seen on the show last night, perhaps an indication that those plans were scrapped. As we discussed earlier, the show was rewritten multiple times by Vince McMahon, with this perhaps suggesting that Triple H's plan for a Wyatt appearance was nixed. Of course, this is just speculation at this point, but the video does appear to make clear that something was indeed planned. Perhaps we'll see the eventual return this Friday on SmackDown. And before you go, make sure you check out 10 UFC fighters who are perfect for pro wrestling.